we have to make now about what our future will be has to do with what it looks like to be a Christian. What does a faithful person look like? Does it mean always looking perfect? We see a clue to this in the scripture passage that we have today. Let me tell you about my very first sermon. It was on Spider-Man, because Spider-Man is a fantastic superhero, but Spider-Man has often been portrayed as one of the whiniest, as having one of the whiniest alter egos in Peter Parker of any other superhero. He is emotionally tortured, in part because he doesn't know the meaning behind his life and his decisions. And so my first sermon was on how Spider-Man needs Jesus. And as it turned out, that particular day, I very much needed Jesus too. The music minister was responsible for finding someone to read the scripture in front of the congregation, but had forgotten that day. He was a wonderful gentleman who liked to turn red when he got embarrassed, and so he turned bright red and pointed at me and told me I needed to read the scripture. I had the little bits and pieces of the passages that I had worked into my sermon and my transcript, but I did not take my Bible up with me. And so, very impressive, very preacherly preacher, I stood up at the pulpit and I said, I forgot my Bible. I need to borrow someone's. And someone walked forward and let me borrow their Bible. As we move through the life of faith, we will probably be called by a couple of different voices. Which voices will we follow? Those that call us to be very impressive, or those that call us to be broken people forgiven by grace? We could call ourselves to be mediocre Christians. There are a lot of people who choose to do this. I'm assuming that we're all here because that's not what we want for our futures. If we are going to mature in our faith, we will probably be drawn in one of two directions. Either toward, to use Jesus' terms, flowing robe people of faith in this scripture passage, and people who are more like the poor widow that is depicted here. Which one of these do you want to be? Which one of these futures do you want to have? We could choose to become one of the flowing robe kinds of Christians, one of these very impressive superhero kinds of Christians. These are the ones who look awesome, who never forget their Bibles when they preach. These are the ones who expect the respect of others, sometimes who demand the respect of others, because after all, they are very impressive. Jesus had a word for people who sometimes look very impressive on the outside and sometimes behave very unkindly toward others. He liked to call them hypocrites. Maybe you have met one before. Maybe you have been one before. I know I certainly have. And so that we don't become too cocky for not being flowing robe Christians in this moment, and so that we will not judge them like they might mistakenly judge others, Jesus gives us an even more difficult call. He calls us to mature like the poor widow. He calls us to become the people who ask for help when we mess up. He calls us to become the people who whine sometimes, but who know that our whining belongs to God and who lay our pain and our challenges at the feet of God. Jesus calls us to let go of all of our impressiveness and lay that at God's feet too. The truth is, and the really impressive people of faith probably don't want us to know this, anyone can become a flowing robe kind of Christian. You don't even have to love Jesus to gain a huge amount of prestige and impressiveness in front of other people. Some of us have a little more difficulty pulling this off because we have unexpected chromosomes for ministry, or because we are colorful in some way, or because we have one eyeball in the middle of our foreheads. But with enough spin control, anyone can look very impressive in the life of faith. The more difficult model in this story is for us to have grace for all of our brothers and sisters, and to become like this poor widow. And slowly over our lifetimes, we can mature into people who have the guts to give it all over for the glory of God, and to give all of our impressiveness over for the glory of God, because we learn that our own impressiveness means nothing. We can mature into people who know that the affection of Jesus means everything. And maybe best of all, we learn that we don't have to be perfect. As you leave this space and move into your future, ask what kind of Christian you want to become. Where we are is not where we are going, but it is up to us to decide in which direction we want to go. Where will you choose to go in your life of faith?